She thought her life was over, but fate had other plans. One devastating day took everything from her, her future, her pride, her sense of who she was. Then, in the middle of her breaking point, a single encounter turned her downfall into something no one could have predicted. This isn't just a story about love. It's about resilience, dignity, and what happens when you finally realize your worth. Stay until the end, because the moment that changes everything comes when she least expects it. And it will make you believe that even the worst day of your life can lead to your best beginning. The morning that was supposed to be the happiest of her life began with the sound of her phone vibrating relentlessly on the nightstand. Arya Khan blinked awake in the hotel suite, still half dreaming of white roses and champagne toasts, until she saw the message glowing on her screen. "I can't do this, Arya, I'm sorry. Just 6 words. 6 words that hollowed out everything she had built. The phone slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Around her, the world looked exactly as it should have. The designer gown hanging by the window, sunlight spilling across the silk carpet, the soft hum of city traffic below. But inside, something had shattered. She'd spent a year planning this day, balancing wedding spreadsheets between client meetings, soothing her anxious mother's endless questions, reassuring her fiancé Aaron that love was stronger than logistics. She'd believed it. She'd believed him. By noon, the florist had cancelled delivery. The venue coordinator was asking about refunds. And Arya, the woman who had spent her 20s mastering calm professionalism as a museum events manager, found herself standing barefoot in a lobby that suddenly felt colder than marble should ever feel. She'd worn the dress anyway, out of shock, maybe defiance. Reporters were already circling the story of the runaway groom and the jilted bride. Her father's company had recently made headlines for layoffs, and scandal liked to travel in packs. At 2 p.m., her supervisor called. His voice was tight, polite, rehearsed. "Arya, with all this media attention, the board feels it's best we take a step back." Effective immediately. In one breath, she lost the career she'd built too. By evening, she was sitting in the same hotel lobby, the lace of her gown wilted from hours of wear. Makeup blurred by tears, she refused to let fall in public. Guests from another wedding passed by, laughing, champagne glasses clinking. She tried to shrink smaller into the velvet armchair, but she could still hear them whisper, her name, her story, her humiliation. On the floor beside her sat a single, broken glass. Someone had dropped it earlier, and the staff hadn't swept it up yet. Its jagged edge caught the light like a warning. That broken shard would become her symbol, the reflection of everything she'd lost, and the first sign of everything about to change. By the next morning, Arya was no longer the heartbroken bride hiding in a hotel suite. She was the whispered headline everyone recognized. Her father's name was trending alongside hers, her face plastered on gossip sites with captions like, "Bride abandoned hours before I do." She wanted to vanish, but humiliation has a cruel way of making sure you're seen. The hotel had offered her one-night stay as a courtesy. After that, she was expected to clear out. The irony was sharp. She had once coordinated luxury weddings in this very lobby, instructing staff on guest service standards. Now she stood in the same place, clutching a folder of unpaid invoices, trying to explain why her fiancé had vanished with both their savings and the venue deposit. Behind the front desk, a young clerk whispered to another employee, not quietly enough, "That's her, right? The bride who got left?" "Yeah, poor thing." Imagine being dumped and jobless in one weekend. Arya felt the blood rush to her ears. She tried to steady her breathing, to stay polite, to not cry. "I just need to speak with the manager," she said evenly. But the manager was already approaching, with pity and formality stitched into every word. "Miss Khan, I'm terribly sorry for the situation. But since the reservation was under Mr. Whitmore's name, we'll need payment for the remaining balance. I told you he's gone." "I understand," he said gently, though his tone carried the weight of policy. "But unfortunately we can't." And that's when it happened. The fragile calm she'd built cracked, just like the broken champagne glass beside her chair last night. The folder in her hands slipped open, scattering receipts and refund forms across the polished marble. The sound of paper fluttering was soft, but somehow everyone turned. She dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the papers before they were trampled, her veil snagging on her heel. Guests stopped to stare, some sympathetic, others entertained. One woman whispered loudly enough for all to hear, "Oh, it's her, the one from the news." Arya froze, the heat of humiliation crawling up her neck. The world blurred in slow motion. Her trembling hands, the faint laughter nearby, the harsh gleam of the marble floor reflecting her broken reflection. She was the spectacle now, the poor jilted bride crawling on the ground of the same hotel where she was meant to start her forever. And then, just before she reached for the last scattered paper, another hand reached it first. A steady, unhurried voice said quietly, "You shouldn't have to kneel for anyone's mistake." That was the moment everything stopped. Arya looked up, startled, her hand frozen inches from the marble floor. The man standing before her seemed out of place among the curious onlookers. A tall figure in a tailored charcoal suit, posture calm, gaze steady. His presence carried weight, the kind that made noise fade and people instinctively step back. He crouched down, collected the last of her papers, and handed them to her with quiet grace. "You've had enough eyes on you for one lifetime," he said softly. "Let's give them something else to look at." The murmuring crowd stilled. Even the hotel manager hesitated as the stranger turned to him. "Send her bill to me," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Sir, you heard me." He didn't raise his voice, but authority threaded through every syllable. "And please make sure she has some privacy." Arya's breath caught. "You don't have to." "I know." His eyes met hers, warm but firm. "You're with me now. They don't get to decide your worth. Claim line." The words weren't loud, but they carried like a vow, slicing through the whispers that had defined her shame. The lobby fell into uneasy silence. Guests glanced away, suddenly self-conscious. He extended a hand, not as a rescuer, but as an equal, inviting her to stand. Arya hesitated, then took it. His grip was steady, grounding. As he helped her to her feet, something in her posture changed. Shoulders straightened, breath deepened. The humiliation still lingered, but it no longer owned her. Without another glance at the bystanders, he guided her away from the crowd, through the lobby's glass doors and into the crisp afternoon air. For the first time in days, Arya wasn't running from her life. She was being led towards something she couldn't yet name. Outside, the city moved at its usual pace. Horns, footsteps, snippets of laughter from people who hadn't had their worlds fall apart. Arya stood on the hotel steps, clutching the folder against her chest like armor. Unsure whether to thank the stranger or collapse, he turned toward her, the sharp sunlight catching the faint silver at his temples. "You don't have to explain," he said. "I saw enough." She managed a weak laugh. "That's what everyone's been saying. The problem is no one actually listens." He studied her for a long moment. "Then let's fix that. Come on." He nodded toward the cafe across the street. Arya hesitated, but something in his tone, gentle, unwavering, made her follow. The cafe was quiet, half empty, with the smell of espresso and rain lingering in the air. They sat in a corner booth, and for the first time since the disaster began, she exhaled. He ordered coffee for both of them, then introduced himself. "Elias Mercer." Her brows lifted slightly. The name rang faintly familiar. "The Elias Mercer, the investor behind the Heritage Arts Initiative?" He smiled, guilty. "But today, just Elias. You look like someone who needs a friend, not a press release." Something in his voice softened the hard edges inside her. She found herself speaking without meaning to, about the morning that had shattered, the fiancé who disappeared, the job she'd been pushed out of to preserve the museum's image. Elias listened without interruption. No pity, no platitudes, just steady, undivided attention. When she finished, he said quietly, "You remind me of myself at 28. She blinked. "You? You're..." "You're you. Once upon a time I wasn't," he said. "I was a junior analyst at a firm that collapsed overnight. I spent 6 months delivering packages to the same clients who'd stopped taking my calls. I thought humiliation meant the end of worth. Turns out it just meant the beginning of clarity." Arya's throat tightened. The words hit somewhere deep, where grief and exhaustion had left her hollow. He leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to prove you're unbroken, Arya. You just have to remember that being cracked isn't the same as being finished." For the first time since her world imploded, she felt something fragile stir beneath the ache. Recognition, maybe even hope. Days turned into weeks, and Arya began to piece her life together, not with the frantic desperation of someone trying to erase a past, but with the quiet determination of someone learning how to live with it. After their encounter, Elias hadn't disappeared like everyone else. Instead, he'd followed through on something most people only promised. He called a few days later, his voice calm, businesslike but warm. "There's an opening at a small art foundation I support," he said. "Community outreach, part-time for now, but the work matters. I thought of you." At first, Arya hesitated. Pride still clung to her ribs like old bruises. "I don't want pity," she told him. "You won't get pity," Elias replied. "You'll get a chance. What you do with it is up to you." That was the difference. He never offered rescue, only a door. And Arya, though trembling, walked through it. The foundation's office was tucked in an old brick building downtown. The work was modest but meaningful, organizing art workshops for kids who couldn't afford supplies, helping local artists display their work in community spaces. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Every paint-stained table, every crayon drawing tacked to the wall, reminded her that beauty didn't need chandeliers to exist. Elias checked in occasionally, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. He'd stop by the office with coffee, listening more than he spoke. Sometimes he'd ask questions that reached beneath her practiced calm. "Do you miss the museum?" "Not the walls," she'd say, "just the feeling of being seen." "Then let's make sure others are." In those conversations, something subtle began to form. Trust, laughter, maybe even affection that neither dared name. Her parents eventually called, half concerned, half curious about the mysterious man whose name had begun to appear beside hers in charity columns. Arya could hear the shift in her mother's tone, part pride, part disbelief. But this time Arya didn't shrink. She'd learned that validation meant nothing when it came at the cost of peace. By spring, the Foundation's programs had tripled in reach. Arya had written new proposals, led volunteer drives, and even convinced a skeptical city council to fund youth art grants. When Elias attended her presentation, he stayed in the back, silent, watching her reclaim her voice in front of the same kind of people who once dismissed her. Afterward, when applause filled the hall, he found her backstage. "You were brilliant," he said. "I didn't faint, at least," she teased. "You did more than stand. You owned the room." Arya smiled, something soft and real lighting in her eyes. "For the first time in a long time, I believe that." Their dinners became more frequent, conversations deeper. They didn't speak of love, but it hummed beneath every pause, every look held a second too long. Elias never tried to erase her pain. He simply made space for her to outgrow it. And somewhere between gallery fundraisers and late-night phone calls about art, Arya realized she wasn't rebuilding the life she'd lost. She was building one she'd finally chosen. A year to the day after her wedding that never was, Arya stood once again in the grand lobby of the Starlight Hotel. The same marble floors gleamed beneath her heels, the same chandeliers shimmered above. But this time, her reflection in the polished surfaces didn't make her flinch. She wasn't the woman who'd once knelt here, gathering scattered papers and broken dignity. The hotel was hosting a charity gala for the Heritage Arts Foundation, an event she had organized herself. Every detail bore her touch, the candlelit tables, the minimalist floral arrangements, the soft live music that filled the space without drowning conversation. When she arrived, the staff greeted her by name. "Ms. Khan, your presentation materials have been set up in the ballroom," the event coordinator said with a respectful smile. That same ballroom, where she'd once been a headline of pity, was now the stage for her triumph. Elias had insisted she take full credit for the evening. "You built this," he'd said earlier. "Own it?" Still, Arya's pulse fluttered when she stepped inside the ballroom. The chandeliers above looked like constellations, bright, unreachable things, and for a brief moment the old humiliation tried to whisper again. But then she saw it. At the center of every table, a small glass sculpture shaped like a broken shard fused into a star. Her idea, her symbol. The broken glass that once mirrored her downfall was now her emblem of reclamation. The guests mingled, discussing her programs, her achievements, her vision. There were no whispers this time, only admiration. When she took the stage to speak, she didn't need her notes. "A year ago," she began, her voice clear, "I learned that sometimes life shatters without warning. But broken doesn't mean ruined. It just means ready for reshaping. The same glass that cut me once now reflects the light I nearly forgot I had." Applause thundered through the room. But Arya's gaze found only one person, Elias, standing near the back, hands in his pockets, pride softening his features. When the event ended, he approached, quiet amid the buzz of congratulations. "You took the place that once humiliated you," he said, "and turned it into proof of your strength." Arya smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Elias said. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, not flashy, just elegant. Opening it revealed a delicate pendant, shaped like a fractured star, matching the sculptures. "Not a promise," he said. "A reminder that you were never broken, only refining." Tears welled, not of sadness but of recognition. She took the pendant, her fingers brushing his. "Then consider this my reminder," she said, "that even stars shine brighter together." He smiled. And in the soft light of the ballroom that had once witnessed her lowest moment, Arya let herself be seen fully, freely, fearlessly. 3 years later, the lobby of the Starlight Hotel looked different, not because the chandeliers had changed, but because of what the space represented now. The annual Heritage Arts Foundation Gala had become one of the city's most anticipated events, raising funds for youth art programs, community studios, and artist residencies. And at its heart stood Arya Khan, founder, director, and living proof that restoration begins where you once thought everything ended. Beside her, Elias stood not as a benefactor, but as her partner in every sense of the word. Their names shared the foundation's banner, yet he always insisted it was hers. "I only invested money," he'd say with a smile. "You invested heart." Together, they'd launched the Glasslight Initiative, a project offering scholarships and mentorships for young creators who'd faced personal or financial hardship. The name, of course, was hers. She'd chosen it after the night she turned broken glass into stars. Now children who might have never held a paintbrush displayed their artwork in galleries. Single mothers took evening photography classes. Retired workers rediscovered the joy of expression. The same community that once whispered about Arya's scandal now celebrated her success. During the evening's program, a teenage girl took the stage. Nervous but glowing, she clutched her art portfolio to her chest and said, "If it weren't for this foundation, I'd still believe I wasn't good enough. Miss Khan told me broken things can still make beauty, and she was right." The crowd applauded, but Arya's eyes shimmered as she turned toward Elias. He didn't speak, but the look they exchanged said everything. This is what we were meant to build later. As the last guests departed, Arya stood beneath the chandeliers once more. The light danced across the marble, catching faint glimmers from the pendant at her neck, the fractured star Elias had given her years ago. She thought of the girl she'd been on that floor, knees bruised, pride in pieces. And she smiled, not because the pain had vanished, but because it had purpose now. "Sometimes," she said softly to Elias, "we have to be shattered to discover the light inside." Sometimes life doesn't fall apart to destroy us. It breaks just enough to rebuild us into who we were meant to be. Iria's journey reminds us that even in the deepest humiliation, dignity can still rise, and love can still find us when we start choosing ourselves first. Because healing isn't about forgetting what broke. It's about learning how to shine through the cracks. If this story made you feel something, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about strength, redemption, and the beauty of second chances.